Welcome to Secretly Sporty. I am your host, Sebastian Langdell, and I'm joined by my co-creator, Austin Ratcliffe. Hey, Austin.
Hey, Sebastian. How's it going?
It is good. Are you sitting down?
I am.
I've got some news. You know how I've always been kind of a Greek yogurt person.
Yep.
You know, hearing some of these guests, who are pro cottage cheese, I just decided, let's see what's going on in that cottage cheese world. It's not that bad.
I mean, that's not really a ringing endorsement, I gotta say.
Here's what I like about it. You can just kind of eat it plain, whereas Greek yogurt, I'm always reaching for the honey.
Okay, but here's what I'm gonna say. Greek yogurt doesn't have a nightmarish texture.
Well, that is a valid point. And I will say that, if I had to choose lightning round style, I would be team Greek yogurt. That's my ride or die. But cottage cheese, I'm just trying to reach across the aisle a little bit, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure I need to be sitting down for this news. I think that our guest would approve of your willingness to try a new thing, grow, not be set in your ways. I feel like that's something he would appreciate.
Yeah, definitely. It was so fun to talk to him. Hanif Abdurraqib is the author of several books of poetry and nonfiction, including They Can't Kill Us Until They Kill Us and Go Ahead in the Rain, Notes to a Tribe Called Quest. One thing that really draws me to his writing is the way that he's able to weave personal history and band biography and kind of like music history and emotion all together with such resonance.
I thought it was fascinating to hear how he approaches music writing and what he kind of feels like his job is as a music writer. It was unexpected, not from reading his writing, but just to think how other people talk about music writing.
Yeah, he has this signature style that really brings so much of his memories, his emotions, and his personal history to bear on the musical experience. And it's interesting, he's a huge runner and talks about this moment, when you start to get up above mile 5 or 6, when you kind of get into the flow and your body is just kind of doing its job, but you also navigate into some kind of interesting thought portals.
Yeah, I mean, he really spoke a lot about what running does for his mind, and especially about where it allows him to go as he's not focused on his body. His body's just doing its own thing, and how that frees up his brain to travel different places. Sometimes not places he actually wants to go, but maybe needs to go, but he is still finds a lot of value and gratitude in that process.
Yeah. I am also always curious, what people are listening to when they're running. He's got such eclectic and expansive taste in music. It didn't surprise me to hear that he has a running playlist that he started, I don't know, maybe about 15 years ago, that's now almost 3,000 songs long, that he just throws on shuffle.
But not only on shuffle, there's only certain miles that it's allowed to be on shuffle.
That's true. And how he kind of like lets the universe decide during those shuffle moments,
And then there's moments where he has to take over. And I do think that's like a good metaphor for life, right? There's times where just gotta let the universe do its thing, and then there's times when you gotta step in.
That's true. There's shuffle times and there's play it through times. Should we get into it?
Let's get into it.
Here is Hanif Abdurraqib. Hanif, thank you so much for being here. I usually start by asking what your most recent workout was and how it went.
I ran 6.5 miles this morning, and I run 6 days a week. 5 days a week, I run between 6 to 8 miles, and then on Sunday I do a big run. So today was 6.5 miles, and it went well. I mean, I think now I'm so in routine with it. I've been running consistently for such a long time that, the greater project is not the run itself, but preparing myself for the run beforehand and then coming down from the run after.
What does that look like for you, like in terms of the preparation, the come down?
I'm 42 now, which I know is not ancient by any means, but it does require a lot more attention to detail, I think, in how I'm taking care of my body before putting that many miles on it, during any given week. So I block out like several minutes for stretching now. I used to only stretch before the run. Now I stretch after. And two, I don't really like to consider it a spiritual practice. That feels a bit extreme, but it is a practice that does take my mind to a place beyond where my mind might go organically, where I'm not, running sometimes inside, like sometimes on a treadmill for like over an hour. And so there is a part of me post run that has to return to kind of my natural self and has to return my brain to the form that it would normally move through the day with, and not the kind of almost alternate world building that has to take place in order for me to get through like miles 3 through 8 or whatever.
What is going on in your mind as you run? How would you describe your kind of thought process as you run?
A lot of it depends on what shape the run takes. I'm someone who likes to run outside when I can. The reason I prefer it, I think, is because the mind can go to some surprising places. Because even though I run the same route every day, when I'm running outside, it's actually not the same route because the ecosystem of that route changes. And not even the physical landscape, but the fact that I'm going to see someone different every time out. Or I'm going to see a different dog every time out. When I'm running outside, I don't necessarily think of myself as a main character in the universe that I'm running through. I tend to think of myself as an observer of a film already in progress, very minor supporting cast member, or like an extra. And that's really joyful. Now, though, the problem is I live in Ohio, so I'm really at the mercy of some unpredictable weather. But I have like a home gym and a treadmill in my house. Of course, because I'm a bit of a fool, my treadmill at home is just like facing a wall. It could be facing a window, but I did not set it up that way. And now it's too hard to move. And so my treadmill is facing a wall. So, and I listen to music when I run. I sometimes watch things, but there is a part of my brain on a treadmill around mile 3 that is spending a lot of time digging into the nuances of like past regrets, or the possibilities of my life had I done things differently, that kind of thing. That's why it's really important for me to post-run ground myself in a satisfaction for the life I have instead of the fantasy of the life I could have had but don't.
Oh, that's really interesting. So what does that look like for you, that grounding ritual in the life you have? Is it a thought process, meditation?
So I have a dog. Her name's Wendy. She's a 10-year-old half Border Collie, half Great Dane mix. And, I live alone except for Wendy. It's me and Wendy alone. And I think that the real thing that snaps me back to life is that I finish my run, even if whether it's an outdoor run or a treadmill run, and I go upstairs or go into my house and Wendy's just so excited to see me. But also in the cool down stretch, I tend to think about, I'm not one to meditate, although I guess this is kind of meditation. In my cool down stretch, I really run through a list of things that I'm thankful to potentially encounter in a day. And these are things that, that can be repetitive, but even the repetitiveness is kind of joyful for me to realize that through the course of a day or a week or a month, there are things that I am excited for each time out that I have gratitude for. And it rebuilds the universe of my actual life as something to be, as like an altar of gratitude, as opposed to an altar of inadequacies and would have beens and could have beens.
I do that before sleep sometimes to kind of center my mind, as in the kind of Bing Crosby kind of way, fall asleep counting your blessings. But I like the idea of doing it coming back from a run. I'm going to try that.
Yeah.
Tell me what you listen to when you're running. I'm so curious.
Well, this is actually a major problem in my life because my running playlist, and every year I tell myself I'm going to remedy this issue. So I began my running playlist in, 2011. And in 2011, I began with a bass. I began with a bass of like 30 songs. I was running much less back then. So 30 songs that'll get me through a run. But then as time went on, I would just, if moving through the day, if I thought of a song or if I felt a song, I just added it to the running playlist. Today, it stands as like 2,500, 3,000 songs, and I just shuffle them all. So there are multiple problems with that. One is that there are songs I can go a whole year without hearing on that playlist. The other problem is that I don't really have control over the shuffle. And so a song that I would have loved running to in 2015 is just not working for my brain right now. Also, there are songs that I put on there at times where I was like clearly going through something. There was like a Teddy Pendergrass song that came up on one of my runs like 2 weeks ago. And I was like, what on earth was I going through when I put Love TKO on this playlist? And I don't remember when I did it. And I don't remember. And so in a way that's delightful to be like, oh, I'm running to this old 50 Cent song, and then this Mayday Parade song's coming on. I'm content just letting the playlist take me where it wants to go in between miles like 2 and 5. But mile 1, I need a very specific kind of entry point. And then that last mile and a half, I need a little more of a focused soundtrack. And usually in that moment, I'm looking for a little more up-tempo, a little more volume, a little heavier. And so I've begun to just kind of skip through until I can braid together a series of songs that works.
Yeah.
At least once a week now, usually on my Sunday long run, I put aside the running playlist and I'll listen to a few new albums. And I love that. I love being delighted by a song that I'd never heard before in the midst of a run. There's nothing like that feeling,
Yeah. There's a song that's kind of crept onto my running playlist recently that was on your year-end list last year, that artist Unflirt.
Oh, yeah. Sup, bro.
Yeah, I've been going through kind of a shoegaze thing right now.
Like, I'm a huge shoegaze dude, and I have a pretty extensive shoegaze series of shoegaze playlists broken down by decades. And I
Mm,
really love running the shoegaze.
same.
Again, probably not in the first mile. Like, I need something else in the first mile to kind of kickstart me. But when I get to that point at which I am just doing the thing, I don't necessarily get to the point of a runner's high that I think a lot of runners get to, but I do get to a point where there's a mundanity to it, where it's like I know my
Yeah.
body is doing the work, but I'm not necessarily feeling exhausted by it. So in that state, shoegaze really works for me. Like, shoegaze
Mm,
works massively for me, in part because there's a blend of ambience, but also sometimes really violent bursts of sound. And that's a beautiful balance.
yeah. I think you mentioned you got serious about running in 2022,
21, yeah.
21. How'd that happen?
Yeah, so I was a soccer player most of my life. Weirdly, when I played soccer, I did not love running. It was my least favorite part of the process. And I did like light cardio through the 2010s. And then I took a break around 2018, 2019. I don't know
Mm,
why. I just kind of stopped and I really fell out of practice, consistency. And then when 2020 hit, I was in my house alone. I remember the summer of 2020, I found myself feeling pretty aimless and wanting to get outside in a way that did not really put me around other people. I was very content
mm.
not being around other people at that point, weirdly. I think that says more about the flaws of my personality makeup than it does. Like, the people who were longing for human connection are the people who were correct. Those are the people I was the one who was an outlier. But I liked the idea of being outside, and I started just doing a mile at a time. And I'd run marathons in the past. I'm probably never going to run a marathon again, but I've run a couple marathons in the past. I remember getting back into running and being like, well, I've run 2 marathons, so why can't I just take to the road and run 10 miles? But, my body started to fall apart almost instantly. And so I
Yeah.
just slowed down. But by summer 2021, I was really in a good groove, and I've kind of been on it ever since. And I have no desire to run a marathon. Last year, I helped a friend marathon train, which, it's funny. I was telling everyone, well, I'm helping my friend marathon train. And eventually my friends would be like, if you're getting up at 4 a.m. and running 20 miles 3 times a week, you're just marathon training. It was cool to know that I could run a marathon if I wanted to, but I had no desire to actually do it. I think the thing is, I don't crave, and I no longer crave, that specific feeling of achievement, which I did for so long. Because honestly, that feeling of achievement is, for me at least, is like nothing. I like rarely felt in my life. Have you run marathon before?
I've run one, yeah, and then I've run a handful of halves.
I mean, it just feels cool. I don't know, like finishing a half or a full marathon just feels incredible. But I think that something happened in my life where I just stopped the pursuit of that specific feeling of achievement. I don't know what it was, but I'm not after it anymore. I'm not chasing it anymore.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I run a lot. I like to run for myself, and I like to kind of decide what my mileage is going to be that week and not have it be dictated by anything else right now. But the part I miss is the kind of getting lost in the crowd and feeling like you are part of this sea of runners that's just surging
The
forward.
collective act of running a marathon, that feeling I miss that, which is funny because I'm so committed to running alone now.
I was going to say one of my favorite routes is actually the Austin half marathon. I live in Austin, and I know you're down here sometimes. Have you run that one?
No.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good way to see the city.
Yeah, what I also love about, I know I'm talking about how I don't want to run a marathon again, but now all this talk has got me back to one, because another thing I
Yeah.
love about marathons and half marathons is it is a good way to see a place. The last time I ran the Columbus Marathon, and I'm from here and I've lived here my whole life and whatever, the route had us cut through the Horseshoe, the Ohio State football stadium. The whole Ohio State marching band was playing, and I remember being so moved by that. It was bizarre. It was like something that outside of the context of the marathon, I would not be that excited about or interested in. And I'm not particularly like a huge Ohio State guy. I didn't go to Ohio
Mhm.
State. The mythology of Ohio State doesn't move me a whole lot. But in that moment, I was so deeply moved. And so it was this moment that reframed a known entity for me. Like, it's like, oh, I know this
Right.
city. I know all the Ohio State stuff, but I don't know it like that. And so there is something about a marathon that can change your relationship to a place.
I lived in Waco for a little bit, and when I moved there, I was training for the New York Marathon, and it was deadly hot. And I remember coming up over this bridge and seeing a buffalo, and I was like, am I hallucinating? And I pieced it together afterwards that I was like on the outskirts of the zoo, and I was just looking into the buffalo enclosure. But I love those kind of magical moments that happen sometimes.
Yeah.
This might seem like a simple question, but what is it that you hope to get out of running?
Well, when I got back into running heavily, it was all about mental health. I'm someone who lives with clinical depression, clinical anxiety. I've done talks where people are like, is running therapy? And I'm like, well, no, I mean, I got a therapist. And running for me can't be therapy because it's not something that I'm going to always be able to do. I mean, like hopefully this will not happen, but I could roll my ankle tomorrow and not be able to run for a month. If I hang my mental and emotional health on running alone, that's a really tricky position to be in. But I do like it as a supplemental action, just another thing I have in my toolbox to level out my brain. That was my initial foray back into running heavily was like, how can I add another thing to my mental and emotional toolbox that can be a useful practice? Now I almost shape my day around it, and it's nice to have something to shape my day around. I'm seeking a lot of things out of it, but at the core, I do think it grounds me. If I could find something else that did a better job of that, I would probably do that, but I haven't yet. And so
Yeah.
I think it's going to be running until I can't.
So what are you working on right now creatively?
I'm finishing up a new book of poems, which I'm very excited about because I haven't put out a book of poems since 2019. And for a long time, I thought I would not put out another book of poems, but I really love the work that I love the work that I'm getting to do. I mean, I think at this point in my career, most people know me as a nonfiction writer, but I do think at my core, I'm much more excited about the process of the poem because it feels more unknown to me. Not that I'm, the greatest nonfiction writer in process, but I do think I have a bit more command of the process. And the process of the poem is something I tend to have to surrender to a bit more. Not to tie everything back to running, but it is true that as I get older, I don't really push myself through. Like, yeah, I have goals. I have mile goals in mind vaguely, but I don't like push myself to them. So if I, stretch and get on my shoes and say, I'm going to do 6 miles today, and at mile 3, I just feel like stopping, then at this point, I'm going to stop. And not only stop, but stop and feel very grateful for those 3 miles. I think about poems similarly. Like, I think about how much the act of writing poems requires me surrendering to the process and having a lot of gratitude for the kind of slow and grueling nature of some days getting 2 lines you feel good about and some days getting a full page-length single poem you feel good about, and having gratitude for each.
I love that. Do lines of poetry ever come to you as you're running?
They do, although I would rather they not, because
Yeah.
I like thinking of my brain as at its best and most useful. It is putting things in very neatly organized boxes that I can go back to later. So if I'm at a concert and a line of poetry comes to me, it's nothing for a part of my brain to extract that line of poetry and put it in the lines of poetry cabinet that I can return to later and open up.
Yeah.
My running brain is kind of just picking through things and throwing them over the shoulder, like not putting them anywhere, just throwing them all over the place. And so it's harder for me to pick through those things later and find them. I mean, occasionally I get useful things that come to me while I'm running, but more often than not, what happens is, particularly when I'm running outside, I delight in something that feels like it could live in a piece of writing, and then it's kind of momentary.
I'm just such a big fan of your writing, and I think about your personal essays that are also music essays and that weave music writing with personal history. I'm curious, when you think about process and you think about essay writing, are these pieces generally mapped out ahead of time? Do you kind of go in with an outline in mind, or do you kind of go in just feeling it out from a certain moment?
I like to feel, I never go in with an outline in mind. The way I often begin is from a memory. Even if the piece does not begin with that memory, I'm trying to ask myself, what is the emotional engine of this song, this concert, this music video, this whatever? And what are the stakes for me individually? Why do I care about this? Because if I define that early enough, and that definition is usually found in memory, then it is easy for me to say, how can I invent a piece of work that you can step into? And through your stepping into it, you're probably not going to care in the exact same way I care, but I can make the stakes of this song, music video, concert, album clear enough that it might connect you to something of your own that presents a different set of stakes for you, even if the stakes aren't necessarily tied to this piece of media. For example, They Can't Kill Us Till They Kill Us. The thing I hear the most about that book is people coming up to me and saying, well, that Fall Out Boy essay, like, I'm not a big fan of Fall Out Boy, but in reading it, I felt connected connected to this friend I lost who loved this other band. And so to do that, I have to decenter the ego and say, I'm not trying to convince you to love what I love. I don't want to be that kind of music writer. And what I would rather do is try to build a really efficient runway for you to find out the exact tone and temperature of your love for something else or for someone else or for some other memory that you can build off of the one that I've offered.
You've got this essay about the Haim song and music video, I Want You Back,
Yeah.
on breakups. I love how you bring the music video for that song into it and the physicality, like the way that they are just walking in the video and then they bring in these kind of exuberant movements. By the end, they're just kind of like exploding and dancing. And I think about that a lot, this kind of idea of embodiment with music. When I was a teenager, if I went to a show, I had to be like standing in front of the stage, like I had to feel so close to them, because I hated the feeling of going to a concert and being so far away that it felt like I could just be listening to the CD at home, you know? And
For sure.
and kind of like with running, like we were talking about the things that happen to you by surprise when you're running, whether it's like a marching band or a buffalo or whatever. I always loved when concerts kind of did something that was completely unexpected and off track.
Right. I love the unpredictability of live music. When I was younger, I grew up in like punk scene, hardcore scene, and that required or that invited a world where me and my friends would be going to see the same artists multiple times. And the fact that we would not hear the same song done the same way twice, really, ever, was really wonderful. It was this testament to the unpredictable nature of the live show, particularly like the live punk show or the live hardcore show. Some of them more DIY, some of them happening in basements, some of them happening,
Yeah.
most of them really engage with a kind of physicality that ran the gamut from brutal to romantic in a way. I'm a little too old now to be, I still go to punk shows, I still go to hardcore shows. I'm a little too old to be in the pit these days. I'm just not really that interested in
Yeah.
getting thrown around. But I'm thankful for that era that really brought a physical relationship with music into my life.
I think because we're the same age, the same kind of span of time for music really resonates with me too. I graduated college in '06, so that kind of turn of the millennium and the like first half of that decade really kind of evokes a certain amount of nostalgia for me. I also just kind of realized at some point that I process emotions and process memories through music.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's something that your writing does so beautifully, is just compose an emotional reality while weaving in musical facts and musical memories.
I know not everyone loves music in the same way. However, all the people I know who love music love it because at some point early on, perhaps in their lives, they realized how vibrantly it was tied to feeling. For example, the first time I heard Whitney Houston's I Want to Dance with Somebody, it was being sung by my mother in the kitchen. And I was so young, I was 5 or 6, and I didn't know who Whitney Houston was. I didn't know that the song was playing at a low volume on the radio, and my mother was singing over that. I thought my mother was a singer, and this was her song. And I felt something. And when I found out that was a Whitney Houston song, when I later was like, oh, Whitney Houston's a singer and this is her song, I didn't feel cheated by that. I felt like, what a miracle that every time I hear this song now, this song that does not just exist in my mother's voice, but exists on radios and on records and so on and so forth. That is a portal back to my mother and that feeling that I had that I could not find language for. So everyone I know who loves music deeply came to that love through some initial spark of feeling, even if they could not name what that feeling was when it arrived. And I'm interested in just mining that. I'm interested in, seeking the language and sometimes failing, but in those failures, kind of building a big gateway for a lot of people to walk through.
Can you think of a time when running carried you through an especially difficult period in your life?
The first time I ran a marathon was rough because I didn't train properly for it. I was much younger, to be clear. I had gone through a breakup and I very foolishly, 4 months out from the Columbus Marathon, was like, I'm going to run a marathon. I did it. It was hard and not fun. And afterwards, it really fucked me up. I was in bed for like a week. I had to be carried up the stairs of my apartment. I remember thinking, okay, that's not the way to deal with heartbreak. But I've had to kind of figure out new pathways to deal with grief and loss in my life as I've gotten older. One thing that my brain does that I love when I talk about where my brain goes when I'm running is I think because my brain tends to carry me back towards the past so frequently in the process of the run, that means I'm never too far away from reanimating the people I love who are not here. Even if it's through the lens of my own regrets or through the lens of, it's like they're always there kind of correcting me and saying, well, at least we had each other for a little while. And so there's
Mm.
this pathway that running affords me that, yes, sometimes it is not great for my brain and the things that my brain puts me through. But other times, it does build a world of memory, like a memory palace that I can vanish into and flip on the lights in a room where someone I love is alive in the past that we shared together. And I can go from room to room and find all these people. And that, to me, that is eternally useful. And that's something I'm
Mm.
eternally grateful for. And I don't know if I'd be able to get there. To be able to get there frequently with running is a real delight. And I don't know if I'd be able to do that any other way.
It sounds like, I mean, running opens up portals for you in a way. Has it been like that ever since you became serious about it in 2021?
I think so. And that's interesting actually, because prior to that, it was never like that for me. Particularly when I was like in high school and college playing soccer, it was it was like never fun. And I think it's because for a long time, running was something I had to do. And it took a lot of years to reformat my relationship with it, because if for years of your life you're told this is something you have to do and you have to do it at a very specific level in order to play, it is hard to remap it onto your brain as something that you get to do. I think around 2021, when I re-entered it, I had this epiphany during one run where I was like, no one's making me do this. I could be doing anything else in the world and I chose to do this. And I want to do this. It's like any other relationship. Like I really believe that the people you love, you have to choose every day that you're going to keep doing whatever it takes to be good at loving them well. I think for me, I have to choose myself in that regard too. Every day I have to check in with myself and say, what can I do to love myself well today so that I can effectively love all the other people well that I want to. And running fits into that equation still for me. I have so much gratitude for the fact that for years now, I check in with myself and it's still something that I feel thankful to get to do. And it doesn't feel like something I have to do.
I find your commitment to gratitude really inspiring. And I mean, it's something that's come up a few times. Is that something that you've developed over the years? Was there like a certain catalyst that kind of woke you to kind of the importance of gratitude, or a certain person who inspired you?
You know, folks who know my work a little bit know this. I've written about it a lot, but for a time in Columbus, I was unhoused, right? So I spent most of the nights when I was unhoused just kind of wandering the streets of the city, right? I would end up in downtown Columbus at around 6, 7 a.m. And there was a church. There's a big church still there in downtown Columbus. And there was a maintenance worker it was a church. So it was like, everyone had 10 jobs. So it was like, the guy opening up the church and doing the cleaning up is also the guy who's doing the paperwork and all that. But there was a guy who noticed that I would be sitting outside of the church around 6 a.m. And there was a window of time where he would open up the doors to the church at 6 a.m., unlock the doors so that he could do his work. But the church wouldn't be open to the public until 9 a.m. People come in for confession or meetings. After a while, he started letting me in at 6 and would let me sleep in the pews for 3 hours. And that's the only sleep I would get for most days. At the time, I don't know how much I appreciated that, but in the immediate aftermath of it, when I got an apartment and when I got a little bit more on my feet, I thought about the accumulation of those hours, those 3-hour bursts where I could sleep, and how much gratitude I had for this person who rarely spoke to me, was very kind, but didn't speak, did not ask me my story, did not want to judge the circumstances I was in. He just saw that there was a need that I clearly had and sought to fill it. I think that honestly taught me a lot about gratitude, because what I needed in that moment was actually not very big. And someone saw that they could provide that to me, and they did. And that was a very simple unspoken transaction. And I really think about if I was someone who required a life where I became immune to feeling gratitude for the smallest things that propel me from one moment to the next, and then I set my sights on only gratitude for the big, bright moments that people see often, the book awards or whatever else, that would misalign me in a way that I think would be detrimental to my day-to-day care for myself and others. Because I know this is a long answer. I'll wrap it up here. I'll say I don't have any kids, but I'm at an age where a lot of my friends have kids. And that has been so wonderful and clarifying for me, because the gratitude of a 5-year-old is not for the large thing, it's really for the smallest possible thing that they want to show you. Or I went over to my best friend's house and played checkers with her young child. And that moment was really special for both of us. I hope. Maybe it wasn't that special for him. I think it was so. But like that is the container of gratitude inside of which a child operates. And to have access to that at my age, at my, I don't say at my age and mean like I'm ancient, but at a time where I think that I would otherwise be engineered to only have gratitude for the big, bright moments, that would be a disservice and a dishonoring to all my friends' children who teach me about gratitude for the small flower they pick from the earth that they want to show someone. And that would be a real dishonor and disservice to that man who worked in that church and said, I got 3 hours of sleep for you. I can't give you anything else, but I can give you 3 hours of sleep. And I hope that's enough.
Yeah. I have 2 young kids, 5 years old and 8 years old. And I think a lot of the reason that I run and work out is so that I can kind of even out my energies and just be present for those types of moments, because they are the moments that I'm most grateful for these days. It's just kind of, what is the surprise? Like, what is the wonder that's going to come your way?
Yeah.
We'd like to end on a lightning round.
Okay.
Cardio or strength training?
Cardio for sure. But I know it's only one lightning round thing. I will say I have to strength train now. I started strength training more seriously like 3 years ago. And part of my, this is a silly thing to say out loud, but it's true. Part of my motivation for strength training is that my dog is getting older and she's 70 pounds. And so occasionally I have to be able to lift her up. But cardio, always cardio.
How about a protein shake or protein bar?
Usually neither, but if I have to pick one, it's going to be a bar.
Are you more of a Whole Foods person?
I think that my diet is pretty funny because I'm thoughtful about what I eat, but I also am still sometimes a teenager and will just eat chicken fingers. But usually I get my protein from like Whole Food sources.
To eat or not to eat before a run?
I will eat before a run. I used to be able to just get up and go, but now around mile 4, I can feel it.
Cottage cheese or Greek yogurt?
Oh, Greek yogurt. I'm not knocking cottage cheese. I know this is a very sensitive topic among cottage cheese lovers, but I'm not knocking it. And then there are people who just use cottage cheese as a catch-all ingredient swap for like everything. And they're always like, you'll never be able to tell. Brother, we can tell. Cottage cheese, the texture for me is a nightmare, but I am glad that it works for so many people.
What exercise would you imagine yourself doing in hell?
Ooh, any kind of lower body strength training, squats, leg presses, leg curls. I hate them.
And how about heaven? What does that look like?
Oh, I would just love a long running trail with a large body of water on one side and some mountains on the other side. And I would never get tired, no matter how long I ran. I could stop, of course, if I wanted to, but I would never get tired. And I sweat a lot when I run, but in my heaven, I am less sweaty. I wouldn't want to say no. I think like no sweat at all would be alarming.
Yeah.
So like I would like to sweat to be aware of the fact that I'm exerting myself, but significantly less sweaty than I am right now.
And then would you rather meet your artistic hero or your athletic hero?
Oh gosh. I probably have more artistic heroes to choose from. So I'm going to say artistic hero just because I think if I laid them all out, I would have a better select. I could like pick one out that I would feel better about meeting. Also, I will say, should I say this? I will say this. Because I'm a writer who's written some profiles and all that, I have met one of my athletic heroes because I was slated to write a profile on him, and it was pretty brutal. It was really bad. And so that has perhaps scared me away from meeting the athletic heroes for the time being.
Well, I mean, speaking of heroes, I can't think of another writer working today who has impacted my own writing, the direction of my own writing more than you. So thank you. I'm just very grateful for you.
Thank you.
And I appreciate you taking this time.
No, thank you. Thank you. This was really special. I don't often get to talk about this kind of stuff. I don't often get to talk about, in the context of my creative work or at all, I don't often get to talk about running or athletics at all. So this meant a lot. Thank you.
Join us next time as we talk to author Bonnie Tasoy about discovering swimming communities around the globe, how surfing is like dancing with a wave, and that one time a dolphin spoke to her. See you then. Secretly Sporty was created and is produced by Sebastian Langdell and Austin Rackless. It's hosted by me, Sebastian Langdell, edited by Austin Rackless and Andy Rattinger. Our music is composed by Catherine Joy. Cover art by Ben Wiseman, represented by Illustration Division Inc. This outro song you're listening to right now is Showtimes by Pocket Radio. Special thanks to Vanity G and Liam Billingham. Please note that we are not medical professionals nor personal trainers. Not all exercises are suitable for everyone. Always consult a doctor before starting any new exercise routine or nutritional program. The views expressed in this show are those of the show's creators or the guests, and not those of any other entity or institution.